Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother and sister, welcome back to Islamic Notes channel. His name was Professor Dr. Alexander Meinhardt, a senior scientist in the field of molecular biology from Germany. He was known for his intense rationality, skepticism of spiritual matters, and dedication to scientific research for over 30 years. Throughout his career, he published hundreds of scientific papers and presented at numerous international conferences. For him, truth could only be proven through data, logic, and experimentation. However, all of these views began to change when he received an invitation from a Middle Eastern university to collaborate on a cross-cultural research project. During this academic interaction, he met a young Jordanian colleague who introduced him to Islam, not with harsh preaching, but with politeness and logical thinking. One evening, after a long debate about science and religion, his colleague handed him a German translation of the Koran. "Read it, not to believe, but to understand what makes us believe," he said. With his scientific curiosity, Professor Meinhardt began leafing through the pages. At first, he read like he was reading an ancient history book, but when he reached Surah Fussilat, verse 53, his heart was shaken. "We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves, until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. Is it not enough for your Lord that he is a witness to all things?" Surah Fussilat, verse 53. The verse struck a chord in his mind. He read it over and over again. It felt like a direct challenge to his scientific understanding, that evidence for God and the truth of Islam could be found in the universe and within humans themselves. As a molecular biologist, he had spent his life researching the structure of DNA, the immune system, and the complexity of human cells. He knew that every detail of life was too perfect to be simply the result of chance. But all this time, he had chosen not to question it further. The verse made him ask himself again, was all of this truly without design, without the will of the Creator? From that moment on, Professor Meinhardt began studying the Quran with a scientific approach. He compared the verses of the Quran with the latest discoveries in science. He discovered that many verses of the Quran did not contradict, but were in fact in harmony with modern discoveries about the origin of life, the creation of humankind, the planetary rotation system, and the structure of the universe. A few months later, he attended a conference on science and Islam in Istanbul. There, he met Muslim scientists who also proved that science and faith can go hand in hand. After a long dialogue and deep inner searching, finally one quiet night, he uttered the two sentences of the Shahada with tears flowing. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." From that moment on, his life changed. He became known not only as a scientist, but also as a speaker who inspired many to open their eyes to the beauty of Islam. He wrote a book entitled Signs Within Us, A Scientist's Journey to Islam, which was later translated into more than 10 languages. Professor Meinhardt never regretted his decision. He realized that all this time he had been looking for the truth outside himself, even though the signs had been within himself, as stated in the verse that changed his life. The new life of a Muslim scientist. After converting to Islam, Professor Meinhardt faced a completely new phase in his life. He returned to Germany with a sense of peace, but also with inevitable anxiety. How would his family, colleagues, and the academic community in his country accept this deeply personal decision? On his first day back at his institution, he tried to act as usual. However, the changes in him were profound. He now prayed 5 times a day, made every effort to maintain halal food, and declined invitations to banquets that served alcohol, something quite common in European circles. These small changes began to raise questions from his colleagues. "Have you converted to Islam?" asked one of his colleagues incredulously. Professor Meinhardt simply nodded. "Yes, I have discovered something I had never realized before, a truth that does not contradict reason, but rather complements it." Some greeted him with respect, but many were cynical and distant. He began to sense how deeply ingrained prejudice against Islam was, even in the supposedly rational and open scientific world. Despite this, he was undeterred. He wrote an article titled "Rational Faith: Why a Scientist Embraced Islam," which was published in his university's private journal. The article went viral and received responses from around the world, both praise and criticism. Despite facing social and professional challenges, Meinhardt actually felt more spiritually at peace. He said in an interview, "Before, I always felt empty. Life was just about work, research, and achievement. But now I know my purpose. I know where I came from, what I live for, and where I will return." This spiritual journey also shook his relationship with his family. His wife, a non-Muslim German woman, was deeply shocked. For those living in European secularism, choosing a religion, especially Islam, was seen as a step backward, even extreme. "Are you going to become a fanatic now? Are you going to force our children to wear the hijab?" his wife asked angrily. Patiently, Meinhardt explained that Islam is not about coercion, but about conscious choice. He didn't force anyone, not even push his family to follow in his footsteps. He simply wanted them to know that he had found peace. It took months for his wife to accept the reality. Although she hadn't yet converted to Islam, she began to take an interest in reading the Koran and asking more questions. His adult children showed a keen interest. His daughter even attended a study session with the Muslim community in Berlin. After several years, Professor Meinhardt decided to combine his two worlds, science and Islam, in a major project. He established the Center for Science and the Koran Studies under an independent research foundation. His goal was to prove that Islam, as is often misunderstood, is not the enemy of science, but rather encourages scientific exploration and intellectual curiosity. He began giving public lectures with titles such as The Molecular Signs in the Quran, Science and Revelation, Are They Truly Opposed? The Human Genome and the Divine Blueprint. In every presentation, he always quotes verses from the Quran that touch on creation, the universe, and human self-reflection. One of his favorite quotes is from Surah Al-Ghashiyah, verses 17 to 20. "Do they not then look at the camels, how they were created, and the heavens, how they were raised high, and the mountains, how they were established, and the earth, how it was spread out?" For him, these verses are not mere poetry, but an invitation to think, research, and seek meaning. His spiritual climax came when Professor Meinhardt performed the Hajj pilgrimage. He stood before the Kaaba, weeping uncontrollably. Amidst millions of people from various races and nations, he felt part of the great Muslim family. "I have spent my life in a laboratory, researching the smallest structures of life. But here I saw the largest structures of life, brotherhood, sincerity, and submission to the one God," he said in a documentary. His Hajj journey became a moment he documented in his personal journal, which was later published in the book From Molecules to Mecca, a spiritual memoir that touched the hearts of its readers. Over time, Professor Meinhardt became known not only as a Muslim scientist in Germany, but also as a figure bridging the gap between the Islamic world and the West, two entities often at odds in public discourse. Through scientific speeches and international media interviews, he consistently conveyed the message that Islam is not a religion that rejects science, but rather one that encourages people to think and seek the truth. At a scientific forum in Oxford, he stated, "While Europe was in the darkness of the Middle Ages, Muslim scientists in Baghdad and Cairo were mapping the stars, writing medical textbooks, and translating ancient Greek knowledge. Islam is the light of civilization, not its enemy. I am not exchanging science for faith, I am combining them." His speech drew enthusiastic applause, especially from international students eager for alternative approaches to civilization. He argued that the clash between Islam and modernity is merely a result of historical and political misunderstandings, not a contradiction between Islamic teachings and science itself. Considering the limited representation of Muslim scientists in European academic spaces, Professor Meinhardt initiated a major initiative called the European Muslim Scholars Network, EMSN, an interdisciplinary community of Muslim scholars aimed at bringing together Muslim intellectuals from across Europe. He wanted to create a forum for scholarly discussion free from prejudice while still upholding Islamic values. In Meinhardt's view, Muslims should not only be consumers of knowledge, but should also return to being pioneers of science as figures such as Al-Farabi, Al-Khwarizmi, and Ibn Sina did. However, these major steps were not always warmly welcomed. He began to face attacks from extremist groups on both sides, Islamophobes who accused him of being a traitor to Western values, and conservative Muslims who considered him too liberal for being open to Western science. Every truth must be tested, and I know this is part of the test of my faith, Meinhardt said in an interview with a Turkish television station. He remained steadfast. He knew that the path he had chosen was not for fame or worldly gain, but to spread the light of knowledge and strengthen bridges of understanding. Personally, the changes in Professor Meinhardt were palpable. Once a highly individualistic person, he became a more empathetic person. He began spending more time with his family, studying Arabic to understand the Koran in its original language, and even spent several months in Medina to deepen his Islamic knowledge. His time was now more balanced between scientific research, academic preaching, and social activities. He established a scholarship foundation for Muslim students in science and opened free clinics in several areas of East Germany with poor and marginalized Muslim minorities. He also regularly attended community activities, from Ramadan sermons at mosques to interfaith discussions with churches and synagogues. He always carried a message of peace. I did not convert to Islam to hate other religions. Islam taught me to understand and respect other people's beliefs, not to erase them. As he approached retirement, Professor Meinhardt wrote an intellectual testament, distributed widely in the form of a free publication entitled Science and Faith, Two Wings of Truth. In the article, he wrote, "O seekers of truth, do not separate logic and heart, for God created us with both. Do not hesitate to approach revelation, for it will not extinguish the light of your reason, but rather guide it to the pinnacle of truth. Do not fear Islam. Nothing is more rational than this religion for those who are willing to open their eyes and hearts." The book is now taught at several Islamic universities and is an important reference in the study of the philosophy of science and the integration of science and religion. Now, more than 15 years since he pronounced the Shahada, Professor Alexander Meinhardt has become a symbol of how a single verse of the Quran can change the course of a person's life. From a skeptical scientist to an intellectual preacher bringing enlightenment to an increasingly restless world. His story is clear evidence that guidance is God's prerogative and can come to anyone, no matter how highly educated, how skeptical, or how far removed from religion. And it all starts from one verse. We will show them our signs in all corners and in themselves, until it becomes clear to them that the Quran is true. QS Fusilat, 53.